The wind howled like a grieving widow through the skeletal branches of Blackthorn Hollow's ancient oaks. Frost clung to every thatch, every fence, every breath. The village square, usually alive with the clatter of buckets and the laughter of children, was silent, save for the creak of a single wooden bench and the soft, ragged breathing of the woman upon it. Alara stood bound, barefoot on frozen earth, her russet dress torn at the hem, her dark hair matted with frost. Around her, the villagers, men with hollow cheeks, women with eyes like smoldering coals, children clutching ragged shawls, stood motionless. No one spoke. No one dared. At the front, the village priest, Brother Cuthbert, held the iron bell of St. Aldrich. His voice, thin as winter mist, cut through the stillness. She swore before God and the gathered faithful, upon the holy cross and the grain of the last harvest, that she would give half her yield to the hungry. She swore it in front of us all. And yet she gave nothing. A sack lay at her feet. Empty. Rotting turnips spilled from its mouth like the last breath of a dying man. A murmur rose, not of anger, but of sorrow. For Alara had been the one who shared her last loaf with the widow of Wickwood, who carried water to the sick in the hovel beyond the mill, who whispered prayers over the graves of those the famine took. And now she had broken her word. That night, the fire in the manor hall burned low, and the elders sat in silence around the long table, their faces lit only by guttering tallow. Lord Aldrich's steward, Sir Gideon, sat with his back straight, his leather gloves resting on the oak. He said nothing. He did not need to. Alara was dragged from cottage by two farmhands, men who had once shared bread with her. They did not look at her. Neither did she look at them. They marched her through the village, past closed shutters, past windows where eyes peered through cracks. A child sobbed quietly. A woman crossed herself. At the whipping post, long unused since the last heretic's trial, stood the bench. A low, broad slab of oak, smoothed by time and sorrow. Sir Gideon nodded. The men shoved her down. Her knees hit the wood with a dull thud. Her wrists were tied to the arms. Her back, bare beneath the torn dress, was exposed to the biting wind. The villagers gathered, not to cheer, not to jeer, to witness. Sir Gideon stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. An oath sworn in the name of God is not a whisper, he said, his breath curling in the cold. It is a covenant, and covenants are kept with blood. He removed his gauntlet. The crowd held its breath. In his hand, he held it, the paddle. Carved from seasoned ash, oiled with beeswax and the blood of a ram sacrificed in times past, its surface bore the sigil of the old faith, a sheaf of wheat bound by thorns. It had been used only twice before, once for a thief who stole grain meant for the sick, once for a man who lied to the church. Sir Gideon raised it. Thwack! The sound was wet. Heavy, like a sack of wet grain falling from a cart. Alara cried out, not in rage, but in shock. Her body jerked. Her head snapped forward. Thwack! A sob tore from her throat. Her fingers dug into the wood. Thwack! She collapsed against the bench, trembling. Tears froze on her cheeks. I beg your mercy, she whispered, her voice raw. I was afraid. I thought if I gave it all away, I'd starve too. I thought if I kept it, I'd live. She pressed her forehead to the cold oak. The wood was rough against her skin. I broke my oath, she choked. I broke it before God. Before you. Before the ones who starved because I was afraid. Her voice cracked like dry reeds. I am not worthy. Silence. Then, a single sniffle from the crowd. Then another. A mother pulled her child closer. A man turned away, wiping his face with his sleeve. Sir Gideon lowered the paddle. He did not speak. He only nodded. The villagers were silent. But their silence had changed. Alone in her cottage, the fire long dead, Alara sat on the floor, wrapped in a thin wool blanket she had once woven for her dead mother. Before her, on the dirt floor, lay her wooden box. Inside, 3 dried apples, saved from the last tree. A scrap of wool, dyed crimson with beetroot, meant for a newborn. And a small wooden horse, carved by her brother before the plague took him. She touched each one. Then, slowly, deliberately, she took them out. One by one, she placed them into the cold hearth. The first apple caught fire with a soft hiss. The wool curled and blackened. The horse's tiny eyes melted into ash. She watched, not with grief, with understanding. She had not stolen from the poor. She had stolen from herself. At dawn, before the first rooster cried, Alara walked barefoot through the snow to the chapel. She carried no sack, no offering, only a small clay bowl, cracked at the rim. She knelt before the altar, placed the bowl gently upon the stone, and bowed her head. Inside, one single apple, the last fruit from her one surviving tree. No words, no crowd, only the wind outside and the quiet chime of the chapel bell. By noon, the bowl was empty. The next morning, the hungry of Blackthorn Hollow found a small pile of freshly ground grain at their doors. Wrapped in cloth, torn from her own dress, stitched with trembling hands. No name was spoken. No one saw her leave. But when the children passed her cottage, they began to leave wild flowers at the threshold. And in the chapel, when the priest rang the bell at vespers, the villagers did not pray for mercy. They prayed for strength. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, when the wind howled just right, they swore they could hear the soft sound of a woman singing, low, broken, but unbroken, in the dark. Not for forgiveness, but for remembrance. And in that, perhaps, was the truest harvest of all.